rush first thing in the morning presentation to you all, but started at the end of the day. And once again as well, thanks to Jen for helping me out with this presentation while I was away. And for putting together all of the budget documents for everybody. Just a quick thanks to all of the department staff who did their PowerPoints yesterday. They did a great job. And glad that they were here to present. So today we're going to get into the operating budget, and I know this is the one you guys all are looking the most forward to, because this is where the tax dollars come into play. So County Council considers the budget presented by staff, provides direction and recommendation, and then as the final approval of the budget itself. For operating revenues, the bottom line in the middle there, 2019, just over 27, almost $0.5 million in revenues. The bulk of that being supplied by property taxes. The very top line, which is the number you will be interested in, is $15.197 million. An increase of just over $250,000 from last year. A small percentage being funded by grants, sales of goods and services, most of that being in utilities. You will see a drop in a lot of this from 18 to 19, and that's due to the removal of the airport. So in the goods and services there, of course, there's no landing fees, no PFF fees, anything there. So it's not anything internally that is affecting us, just the airport. Services to other departments, right here, this is our internal transfers to the fleet and IT departments. So that shows up as an in on the revenue and out, and the expenses balances out. And then some smaller revenue line items here. This bottom line is the market access network, the $500,000 that was moved from the capital budget into the operating, which I was mentioning a little bit ago. On the expenditure side, we do show a balanced budget of $27.9 million. Broken out and said by department by object code, so the bulk of that being salaries and wages. Next, contract and general services, materials, supplies, and operating costs, and then this is that in and out I was talking about, the fleet and IT charges. Some smaller things here, emergency services, debenture payments, and a transfer to reserves of $3.6 million, and those will show up in each of the individual department budgets that we'll go through over the next 2 days. Expenditures by department, and this is amount of expenditures, not tax support. County Council, $600,000 in expenditures. CEO office, $400,000. Municipal services holds the lion's share of just under $20 million. Corporate services and community services, as Larry mentioned yesterday, we're pretty close to being equal there. Overall budget adjustments. So we did factor in a 2% on the salary and benefits. This is a COLA estimate only. Of course, you know that our negotiations are upcoming for the next QB contract. So we have always in a negotiation year just plug the standard COLA estimate there, because we do try and factor something in. This is in no way saying that that's what's going to happen, but we have to put something in, so that's what we've done. In the past, we did apply a 2% inflationary increase to most material and contract lines where applicable. Historical trends were reviewed and considered in most line items, especially in items such as utilities, supplies, repairs, and maintenance, and that was to determine the trend, whether we should go up or down on those line items. Not just applying 2% flat across the board. We did review every line item and see if that applied or was necessary. Budget adjustments within the departments, an annual review of reduction of power, natural gas, and insurance. A review of these areas performed annually, and costs are adjusted accordingly based on historical actual costs and anticipated future trends. I know we have factored in the solar panel, a conservative estimate there about a reduction in power costs. Fuel purchasing, usage and pricing is reviewed annually to ensure that accurate funds are in place there. And then departmental reviews, which begin in the fall with each department reviewing their overall budget to determine any efficiencies, savings, and potential other revenue sources. So So as I mentioned earlier, we have a just over 250,000, so 266, 295% increase, or sorry, dollar increase over last year's tax support. That equates to 1.783% increase in tax support. That is before growth, estimated growth and inflation. And just a little bit of an impact summary here. So here's the 266 with 1.783 before growth. That 266 is made up of about 25,000 just maintaining our current service level. So that is no changes or anything. That's the reviews, that's adding COLA and whatnot. We have 1.4 million in budget additions and new initiatives, those type of things that you'll see throughout the budget presentations. And estimated $1.2 million of efficiencies and cost savings. And a lot of that is to do with market access, the calcium base stabilization project. And that makes up the $266,000 there. So after, down here, after projected growth and inflation numbers are taken into account, we are looking at an approximate 0.883% increase in tax support. We're not far off of zero, but we are not at zero. As mentioned here, though, there are a number of budget additions and new initiatives that council can consider if they wish to reduce that number further. Right, so as I showed you before, we had 500,000 transfer from the capital to account for that debenture payment. If the direction today was to fund the entire debenture payment, that would be an additional 240,000, which should bring that number down to 26,000, which is basically zero. Okay. That's the format, same as capital basically. We'll start with council's budget, CAO, then move into municipal, corporate, and wrapping it up with Larry's department. More than likely tomorrow. Any overall questions?
Yeah, I do have on page 163 on your first page. How come underneath revenues you have no revenues coming out of assessment and taxation? Or am I misreading that across the line?
On 163, oh, that's the airport.
Oh, that's the airport.
Yeah.
And the other question I have is ICFs. Have
Yes.
you dealt with them at all, or? 'Cause I
Those-
couldn't see it in here, so.
Well, I don't think there's really so much a cost associated to them other than just taking place in the normal everyday operating activities.
Well, yeah, there will be a cost eventually.
Oh, sorry. okay.
Yeah, eventually there will be a cost, you're correct, but I think because they're due in 2020, we'll be taking 2019 to implement them, and then we'll realize what the costs are then. So for 2019, no, there's no cost other than our time and.
Sorry, I thought you just meant the cost to prepare them.
Oh, no.
Yeah, for cost sharing and whatnot. As those ICFs are hammered out, then we'll know. But for now, we haven't put anything in the budget to. No.
And I think they're supposed to be done in 2020, and I'm not sure what time in 2020, but on my goal is to get it done before the end of 2019 so we can budget for 2020.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. So Tracy,
Yes.
the airport,
Yes.
so when were we running that one now? Till end of 2019?
We are, but not as a department of the county anymore. We're just running it as a contract.
Okay, no, because otherwise we're missing something in the budget.
Yep. So we did pull that out because now it's basically, it's just, they give us money, we give it.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, Tracy. Where did that, on the airport, that, what was left there, where did that go?
The reserves are still, we have our surplus reserves from previous years, they're in our reserves accounts. They show up on a balance sheet, they don't, they're not part of the operating budget.
No,
They show up as an asset. it, sorry. You're right. I erected. Okay, I'm gonna go to this page. I'm just gonna, no, we're not actually gonna scroll through here, I just have one open, so you always have that in mind, how much the taxes are for the year. We're gonna go start with council's budget, so on page 173, go to that page. Okay, so in the revenue lines, there are no transfers planned in any of the 3 years. In line E1, salaries, wages, and benefits, we have the increase, as I mentioned, based on 2% estimate right now. E2 is just contract and general services, which is mainly travel and subsistence charges by council. And this is increased based on historical actuals. E3 is increase in service to departments to offset IT costs related to council. In E4, we have no operating projects in 2019. E5, grants to other organizations. So this is where the bulk of council's increase comes in. There was a $1,000 addition made for a college and university bursary program. So that line was added, and then $100,000 was added for the community grant program. And this was mentioned in the springtime when we brought forward about the land trust reserve and the counseling rescinding of that policy. At that time, it was we were directed to include that in the 2019 deliberations, and we have done so for your consideration. So it is included, the full $100,000 being fully supported by tax support, nothing offsetting that. So we did not recommend that get pulled from a reserve or anything. If we're going to implement the program, I think our recommendation is to fund it with property tax. That is your program, whether you want to see that go forward or not. And E6, this is the annual transfer to the donations reserve. We do collect 50 cents per capita that goes towards the donations policy reserve.
Just a question, you have down here in the operating breakdown, elections cost $25,000. Is that, what's the total cost to do the election? Approximately.
Yeah, we'd have to look that up. I don't have it on the...
Just curious, because a few years ago, to make it more equitable, what we were doing, instead of every 4 years putting money in for an election, we did it yearly, broke it down, and so that there was just some budgeting consistency. Might be an option.
I know that was a budgeted amount, and I think it depends if Palliser was also having an election, because if they do, then they tend to split costs with us. I'm not sure what final came out to, though. We'd have to try to look that up.
Ross?
Just looking at Hayden and Associates here, it was 43,000, just about 44,000 this year.
Oh, yes. So, sorry, I should have mentioned that on E4 operating projects, the Hayden and Associates contract was removed during 2018, or canceled, and so we no longer have that in the budget for going forward, 2021. Even though it was funded from reserves, it really doesn't show up any change in tax support because it was funded from reserves.
So he had a contract.
He did, and it's no longer.
So, speaking of that one, we probably need somebody to replace him if he doesn't want to continue on.
It's very difficult for us to lobby from this far away. I mean, he did a lot of work for us to get to the right place.
Yeah, I do agree with that we probably should replace him, and he got to the right places down along there for us, and you can't put an exact number on it, you know, how much money that may be brought towards comp, but to me, the way it looked, and I think to some of you guys too, you know, it probably meant quite a bit.
Okay, there are no funds allocated right now in the budget for another lobbyist contract. If that's something all council wishes to throw back in there, we can.
Ken and then Oz?
Well, at some point in time, we're gonna need a lobbyist up there, one way or the other, because we can't be there all the time. So Jack won't be working at all? Why?
When Lauren and I met with him, he's doing, what's he doing now, Lauren? He's not,
The Native Art Recovery Project.
yeah, so he's stepping back from it.
Okay, but we're still gonna need somebody, no?
I think so.
So we should put it back in there.
Oz?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should put it back in there, and I don't know if we want to discuss that now or that we look at it in the future. Who's out there and who would be a good person for us to have as a lobbyist person.
I think if you're gonna go in that direction, it would be better to do some more information. And also, if we do decide to go forward, we should, to be equitable, put out an RFP for the services, so. I think a report would need, yeah, we have to, but a report would need to come back to council, I think, in the next month or so.
But we can put the fundings back in. Yeah,
So just out of curiosity, why would we RFP that? Like, if you could find somebody, it depends on who the government gets elected, you're gonna have to find somebody who's government friendly.
I'd have to fall within the guidelines of the purchasing policy, awarding a sole source just to that. Just has to meet the purchasing policy guidelines.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman, would it be prudent then to leave this out of 2019 and then see how the rest of the year plays out with the intention of looking towards 2020 then to have it installed?
Well, we won't, you know, and honestly, that's probably a good idea because we don't, or won't have a government that's what we call really up and functioning until at least a year from now or better.
Yeah, great. But if we do find somebody,
It's a reserve transfer anyway, so we just bring it forward. Let the town do that.
So everyone's good with putting that 40,000 out of the reserves and into a lobbyist line? Okay. 45, I guess we'd probably round it up to 45. Okay, I can add that for 2020 and 2021. Looking forward to 2020 and 2021.
Before you leave that page.
Yep.
So the councillor discretionary fund, how do we, or whatever you call that fund, how do you get that back up to, like, for donations and things, how do you get that back up to where it was, to maintain a certain level?
Well, the reserves policy that we passed last year, I believe, has a limit of $100,000 to maintain that account in every year. And we typically end up transferring that through year-end surpluses. We replenish that back up to $100,000. The donations reserve is a separate reserve, and it's the $5,100 that gets added to that every year. Gets accessed pretty frequently, not ever more than is available though.
So the 83,700 that was done in the approval for 18, what was that for then?
43,700 was for Hayden and Associates, and 40,000 was for the
Okay.
CAO recruitment costs.
Okay.
Yeah, so assuming we have a surplus this year, and I believe we are in areas we are anticipating on that, that account is scheduled to be replaced up to $100,000.
I was just gonna answer the earlier question regarding the election costs from 2017. So it did come in just over $20,000. And that included some orientation.
Thank you. Okay, so again, the bulk of, so council is looking at an increase in tax support of $145,000 this year. The bulk of that being the $100,000 community grant program being funded by tax support. The rest is just basic service levels. Any discussion on the grant program?
Steve?
On E1, like on the salaries, was there, since we dropped a few committees, was there any adjustment down for a few meetings less?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think we reduced anything.
Have we
for that.
been close to being on budget for that? Not really, okay.
So,
It's been over.
yeah, I'm
So-
bringing forward a financial report in there. I did report a deficit in the last quarterly report and then reporting a deficit again for council budget. So we left it as is and hope that with some of those other committee changes, it should be more in line.
The committee changes, and we are also going to be undertaking very shortly here a counselor's per diem type review, like an external review of what other municipalities are doing and just seeing where we are there. So, yeah, no, we didn't, but I don't think it needs to be cut back at all. Any discussion on the grant program?
And just depending on how that plays out and what council decides to do with the data we're collecting, it may be less or more than is in the budget right now.
Yeah.
Doug?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will fight then.
Thank you.
Tracy.
Thank you.
So we're going to make available the 100,000 through the community grants, I believe is the idea. Will we still take applications for municipal reserve for projects that qualify for that funding then?
Yes. Yeah, so anything that does qualify for the municipal reserve, we would obviously refer to that program, and we are going to be working on a policy here for the use of those MR funds. As we mentioned yesterday, we talked about that $500,000 threshold, that cap on it. So that policy is going to address that, whether you want to keep it at that or lower it, and how much do you want to make available for those uses. So this one would kind of replace that Land Trust Reserve Grant Program, would be open to everybody and anybody basically that wants to apply for it. We can set the parameters of it. Basically, we were thinking the same as the other one. We chose the $100,000 because that's kind of an average of what we give out. Some years are more, some years are less, but I mean, it's a nice, it didn't cost us anything before, so this is an additional almost 1% on our tax support increase to have this program run this year. I know it was a wish list of council to have it. I know you guys all love that program, but it is 100% tax supported and will hit the bottom line for sure. So you can adjust that amount, you can yank the program, we can go ahead with it. You can consider it for a few days here if you want.
In the past, we had capped at 100,000 when it was municipal reserve. No.
No, what we did there was money in from the year before plus interest is what we gave out. But we used an average and came up with about 100,000. It was kind of a good rough number. Some years it was only 80, some years it was 120. But if you kept it consistent at 100, there's no shortage of applications, that's for sure.
So then we still have to shape that, what that policy will look like then, that's still to be determined.
Yeah, until we get approval to go ahead with it in the budget. We haven't spent a lot of time on it. I would think that it was gonna kind of mirror the old program, be for capital projects in nature. Limited to, I think we capped it at $20,000 projects every other year.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, if there's no further discussion on that, I'll take you 181, the CAO's budget. I'll just do this quickly on Anne's behalf. It'll take us longer to do the shuffle than it would to go through the budget.
You're doing good, keep going.
So revenue lines, we do have a transfer from reserves of $20,000, and that is pulled every year to help fund that employee appreciation rate in September. So that offsets that. And E1 is salaries, wages, and benefits. adjusted there for the hire of the new CAO. And as I mentioned, the COLA increases. Contract and general services, the largest increase there is to offset IT costs. And I should explain that I think the reason IT costs are going up is because of the loss of the airport.
So it's two parts.
Two parts.
Yeah, so the loss of the airport is definitely has an effect on the IT rates because they've had to be negotiating. You'll actually see it even further in 2020, a little bit more of an adjustment. The second piece is, as with fleet, Doug and I sat down and I had him identify everything. I don't think he's very happy with me. And then had them sorted by department because we were finding that the allocations weren't necessarily fair between departments. And although Maddie might be a department of one with communications per se, or Martin, they might have 3 different types of technical uses that they, you know, like an iPad, a laptop, phone, whatever it might be. So there needed to be some adjustment there for fairness as well to ensure that the use fell in line with the users. So there are some fluctuations throughout 2019 to correct for this. Also, we identified more equipment that specifically in administration because it encompasses the whole building. So administration is taking on like the commerce room and Coyote Flats and those equipment pieces as well, where I don't think historically we were collecting enough for replacement, and so Doug and I took a look at that and adjusted there as well. So that's where you're seeing some of the changes for this year's budget. It was a big exercise, but we got through it.
So the more high maintenance you are as a user, the more it costs you. The more devices you have, the more it's going to cost your department.
So it's just like life.
Pretty much. And operating project for $20,000 straight across the board there for the 3 years is for that employee appreciation evening in September. Nothing big, in fact, a slight decrease in the CAO's tax support this year. This is going to change quite significantly next year because we're going to bring HR staff into this budget, so you'll see some fluctuations there, but there will be a reduction in mileage, so I'll look at it. Any questions on this? Sorry?
You have 2 people on this right now.
This is 2, yes.
Yeah.
Burden rates, yeah.
And just before I go to you, Claus, one question. The $20,000 allocated for the gala,
Yes.
didn't council donate money to that too? So where does it show up in the council budget? Or is it?
It's from a reserve, the council discretionary reserve.
It's pulled from council's discretionary reserve. So your reserve is on the balance sheet side of things, so we draw it out of that account. It doesn't show up in your budget, it shows up here.
So the money we approve goes to this $20,000 number?
Yes. But it's not an expense of you, it's an expense in Ann's budget. You just allocate us to take it out of that bank account, basically, is what you're doing. It's not an actual, the expenses flow through Ann's budget. And you approve that we can draw it out of that account.
But it actually isn't an expense out of the CAO's operating budget either, really. It's kind of overall.
It is, but it's one line item for us to split that among every department would be
Yeah.
kind of
So,
nightmarish.
Or I guess we could put the whole thing in council.
well, the
Either way, it's an in and an out, so it
Yeah.
doesn't affect tax support.
So what was the cost of that, just out of curiosity? Is it more than 20?
They come in pretty close. I think they
Yeah.
were slightly over,
Just slightly 100.
like barely
Okay.
over, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HR, where are they currently? situated?
Currently, they're in the finance and administration budget.
And why are you changing them to the CEOs?
They're reporting to Anna.
Oh, okay, oh, that changed, okay.
Yeah, we just had some, just movement. They didn't like me anymore, so. And that's CAO's budget, if you have any questions. I'll pass it over to Rick, if you want to get into municipal services.
Yeah, Rick, you want to start?
Is anybody else warm? I can adjust the temperature. I don't know, Robert's gonna put
I'm warm, but I don't know if it's just me here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well, I'm gonna put my coat back on again. You guys.
Good. Now that we're done with all that nonsense, we get to the real nitty gritty, the best department.
You just called council the CAO nonsense. Yeah, clarified that. Thank you for that. I'd be very careful. Carry on, if you dare.
Okay, so I'm sure all of you have read our intro into the operating budget and all the good stuff we put in there. And some of the ways that we're meeting the goals of the strategic plan. Thanks, Jennifer, for putting all that together for us. All right, so I've just been told of a directional change, that we're gonna skip to page 201. Agriculture services. So there's a couple of small changes, services to other departments. That's, we had the same thing last year when we stopped doing services for the airport. Now this is for them coming here to cut the grass. We get the same contractor that does the city hall across the street now. It's far cheaper than having our guys come from Butte with the ride on lawnmower and cutting the small amount of grass we have here. The other stuff like the sprinkler system at the building here has been dealt with either internally by Cole or through a contractor, and those services are far cheaper having them done than obviously sending somebody here from Picture View. The rest of the items are just cost of living increase and the wages that we talked about already. We have a $5,000 overall increase in the department, which is almost negligible. What do you call it? What does an accountant call it?
Pretty much zero.
It doesn't really-
What? It's a small, it's a small increase.
Rick's still looking for
No,
it.
you guys have a word that
Insignificant?
it's close to that. But the accountants, they got this Martian word that they use.
Martian.
For a wash, it's a wash. Can I just add, Rick? Just when I was working with Gary on his operating budget, Gary is generally very conservative anyways. And of course with the fleet rate reviews as well, we had some adjustments there. So, he felt that they could hold the line pretty well moving into 2019 and forward, with the way things are going, and that's why there's such a minimal. It's just kind of going through the line by line, adjusting where we needed to, putting in inflation where he felt it was applicable. So, Gary's really quite easy to work with, and usually one of the first guys to recruit his budget to me.
Okay, so, yeah, if there's not a whole lot to discuss there, not a lot of big changes. If you guys have any questions, you can ask about Ag Services. There were some changes in their operations based on Terry Morozowicz's retirement, and we brought in, as Gary said yesterday, a new up-and-comer that looks to be like he's gonna serve us very well and keep us online, so.
Klaus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Parks and operations stuff, why is that coming down on a regular basis? Are we doing less there, or is just, more economical, or whatever.
A5.
A5, yeah.
I think a lot of that is just based on the averages that have come in and historical budgeting, but Gary may have a better idea of that, but that didn't really come up in our discussions, and
Some of it is
No, it's-
staffing changes because wages get adjusted through all those activities. So some of it is that.
Hi, how are you? Good. Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Nominal? Nominal?
oh yeah, that too is the revenue, the strychnine. The revenue on the strychnine is, is decreasing. And that's something we'll have to look at, and next year we'll still be selling it, possibly by 2020 that's gonna disappear, so we'll have to have a way to offset that. You guys good with ag services?
Don't see any questions coming.
No. Okay. Fleet services. Well, there's the intro is, 207. And on, so fleet services is, they're like IT, so they're basically a break even, their charges get charged to the users, who use that equipment. You can see at the bottom how it's broken down into each of the departments. Obviously, the biggest part is public works, that's all the equipment. The expense, and then obviously it's charged out in the hourly rates as revenues. Other than that, most of the changes are fairly insignificant. There's a E1, salaries, wages, and benefits. That's increase in salaries and wages for COLA, and required adjustments in benefits in that department. We'd have to talk to payroll to find out exactly what that is, but E1, the increase in benefits, adjustments in benefits.
Oh, it's just an overall adjustment and correction.
So are these non-union or union positions? Or both?
They're both. So that'd be Ron Chapman. I think some of that is, my wage gets broken into each of the departments.
We did adjust that this year as well. Sorry to interrupt. So historically, Rick's wages were just broken up primarily between the 4 departments at 25% each. So this year, we didn't include tech services, and we should have, and some of the departments don't require as much of his time as others, so I believe we have public works with the largest percentage of his salary now, so you'll see that some of this change as well. Tech services is at about 15% of his wages, and then the rest is broken up between utilities, ag services, and fleet, because as the director, he manages all of that. Where with Larry's and Tracy's, they've kind of stuck with finance and administration and community services, even though it's the same thing. But we find that in municipal services, it makes more sense across the board, specifically with fleet, where we're collecting rates back.
Well, and for costing
And
purposes.
for costing, yeah. So that was a bit of a change in the whole municipal services department this year. We did a lot of going back and looking at our rates and our breakdowns this year with IT rates, food rates, distribution of wages where they should be, so a lot of adjustments for those things this year.
Yeah, and one of the biggest items there, E3, is a lot of that is fuel costs that have increased on the expense side, but then again, it's just increased on the rates being charged back, so it becomes a wash.
So then, Rick, before you leave that one, we talked about the solar energy here on this building. Is there any benefit to doing it at Victor Butte as well? And buying an electric vehicle to run around for some of the employees and just plugging it into the solar panel? Could you save any money that way?
It's worth a study. There are companies out there that will give you a free analysis of whether it's worthwhile to do it or not. And absolutely, I think tech services could put that on their list for something to, and they're well versed in what we went through for this building, so obviously it should be something for them that they can pick up fairly simply. I would guess without the very many trees around and the angles of the roofs and stuff, there's probably some viability to putting solar out there. We'll look into it.
Because I see that, well, the last thing they announced at the RMA was another grant for solar energy.
Yeah.
And for vehicles, there's
Yeah.
grants,
Yeah.
whatever.
By all means, we can take a look at that. And the vehicles, I'm not sure, but we would have to look into it. I've never even, it hasn't come across my desk yet to look at electric vehicles, but yeah.
And the grant announcement was through Minister of Environment, that she
Yeah.
just made that at the very end.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to look on, she said it to me.
Sure. It's been announced?
That was, she announced it right
Oh,
here.
okay.
Right there.
All right.
Yes.
Oh, we didn't hear
How many
that.
billions?
200 and something.
Okay. All right, so for the most part, it stays consistent for the next several years with the one change, the CAO's office, that vehicle, that's supposed to say admin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I actually don't know if we have that in my capital, I just realized. Yeah, it wasn't, no, so I did that, I edited it.
Okay, so what that is we've noticed a shortage of vehicles at the admin office, even with the Jeep, because in the summertime, well, it looks like we've got vehicles that are parked here and for everybody's use. They do have specific purposes. We had the Jeep that gets utilized by several people when the Explorer is busy. However, we've noticed that several times where there's no vehicle at all available here for staff to use during the day. And the idea was that we would add a vehicle, another one in the realm of the Explorer to move people around.
Actually, I did have a brief conversation when you were away with Ron. We're gonna try and get a little bit of a bigger vehicle, and the reason is because a lot of the time I travel with council, so that we could all travel in that one vehicle. So he suggested an expedition. I could take all people. You're gonna drive? Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, so the way that,
Maybe not,
Come on, it wasn't that bad.
yeah, the way the directive is for the Explorer that's out there, it's not necessarily meant to leave on long-term
Yeah.
meetings or to be parked at the airport or those type of things, where this other vehicle would be more, I think, for more executive use type thing.
Tracy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and sorry, my apologies, I should have mentioned that on the CAO's budget is that there was an amount included for the annual charges for a vehicle for the CAO's office. Skipped right over it, sorry.
Clause.
Yeah, talk about this extra vehicle, and, well, I mentioned expedition or whatever, but for the couple of times that we go away and, well, we can't fit 8 people in there anyway, I mean, this, we're not, we might as
No,
well.
but bigger than
Then we might as well get a bus. But I mean, I don't see the necessity of buying an extra vehicle for those kind of purposes. I think we could probably get around cheaper than that with rentals or something.
Just to that, it's not just for those, that's also added, but there is a shortage here of admin vehicles, and there's very often when I go to drive somewhere or somebody has to go for a meeting off-site, there is no vehicle available. So that is just added in.
So just a curious question, why can't you use your own and get paid the same as the rest of us?
We do.
Okay.
It's, some people don't have vehicles, some have other reasons why they don't have a vehicle on a particular day. There is a need to have a couple, and that's why we've only had basically the Explorer, and then the Jeep is like, it's just because it doesn't get used in the winter time that it's around here for other people to use if they need it. So we bring it in, or leave it here to be used. I use my vehicle quite often, if I've got to run out, just because I know there's a shortage here, and it's better for me to use my vehicle to drive around those roads than somebody to drive their Audi or, lots of people drive Audis, but there's one out there, you wouldn't expect him to go drive on Doug. But anyway, other people, I mean, they're not so comfortable driving on all the gravel roads and stuff that,
What's the life expectancy of that Jeep?
we're about 3 years past. We should have got rid of it 3 years ago.
One of the point, should have never bought the damn thing.
Well, it's serving a good purpose, because to put a student in there to go park out the dust and everything is great use for sure.
Positive.
Well, I just have a problem. When I come driving up here, see those vehicles, a couple of those 4 or 5 vehicles standing there, and I figure, why do we even have them? If you can't utilize them any more than that, then try to have people just get paid for using their own vehicle. And I know sometimes like an Audi, whatever, you can't use on a gravel road, but then again, does this person, doesn't he have to go on a gravel road with a vehicle like that? Probably not, because he probably doesn't have no work on the gravel road then anyway.
No, that was just an
Yeah,
example of a vehicle that's
yeah.
out there that, the vehicles that are here, and we've had this discussion several times, why is there particular vehicles that don't move? We did keep one extra vehicle for Cole to use for his bridge inspections, and we've just basically kept that around because coming up in the spring, that's gonna be, he's gonna be doing road condition assessments for asset management, he's gonna be doing the bridge inspections, he's gonna be doing a lot more field work than he has in the past. Scott's truck out there has to be used all the time. He is on the road probably every day, at least at some point in time. Dwayne's truck is out there. He does all of his running around to the extents of the county, and he needs a truck. The Explorer, you guys all know how that gets used every day, virtually every day, if not more, and then the Jeep. And those are the 5 vehicles that are out there. So there may be a perception that you drive by and you see 5 vehicles parked there at one time, but there's a lot of other times where they're all on at the same time. So there's no frivolous expense out there that, and like we're saying, we could very easily utilize one more. And when we were talking about the truck replacement and those kind of things, we did talk about rotating those trucks through on that same rotation as the rest of the vehicles. The only thing is we're not gonna send the Explorer out into that rotation because it doesn't make sense. If we buy a vehicle now, then when that Explorer is ready to be replaced, then that one will be in the middle of its life, and they can just keep leapfrogging.
That's fine.
Yes, Rob?
So on fleet, I guess,
So fair question is, how often did it happen there was not a vehicle available for the person who needed to go out in the county?
in, probably more so since June of this year. Before that was maybe once or twice a month. After June of this year, it's happened quite often. I think it's weekly. There's at least for a half a day kind of thing. Maybe more than that. Some weeks have been busier. We tend to spread ourselves quite thin, and we're running meetings here, meetings there, and like I said, I've had to use my vehicle more than I have in the past. And or we end up, Devin and I using the Jeep to do things that, I mean, it's kind of odd pulling up to a meeting with a bunch of people that are getting out in suit and tie and stepping out of the Jeep when it's all dusty and just, I mean, we've had that situation happen several times. Not that we're above that, but it's just kind of a feeling. If we had to pick somebody up at the airport that was in a suit and tie, it'd be kind of odd. I would definitely take my own truck versus, and that's not a great truck either. So.
Is it a Ford?
It's a Ford. So that's fleet. Like I said, the biggest expense increase is basically the fuel, and we've carried that on. We haven't budgeted a big fuel increase for the next few years. We're hoping that it's going to come down, which we've seen that trend before.
One thing on the fuel too, we did have a lease and we've revisited that lease and we're, that we sell fuel to, for revenue, we have increased that, correct?
Yeah.
So there is a small increase in that revenue.
Yeah, to the school division.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, you talked about it a little bit this morning, but the RMA fuel program, we don't use it because
for some reason, the pricing doesn't work out in the south. We've had that discussion with the guys from Tabor, and it's the same thing for them. The pricing that we're getting from the local suppliers, when you add in the increase to the trucking costs, the price we're getting from RMA is more than we're getting from the local suppliers. We tender it every year, and we invite them to submit a price, and it just doesn't compute to go with them. And Tabor's in the same boat.
So who do we get their fuel from?
Right now, it's
Eldorado.
What's that?
Eldorado. And you tender it out every so often?
3 years.
Oh, good. Okay.
See, it's based on rack pricing or Bloomberg pricing, so the price of the fuel rack makes no difference. It's how much it costs to get it to your bulk station is basically, and for some reason, as soon as you come south of Calgary, I was there last week and it was $3.9, and then here it was $1.24, and so their RMA is basing theirs on what's happening in Calgary North, which all the pricing, for some reason, there's a 20% surcharge to come to Lethbridge, so I don't know why that is, but.
yeah.
My understanding too is, and I think you got the email, is that the RMA is now looking at fleet and providing those services too. So I think Ron was going to speak to you about possibly them coming to bring a presentation to us.
Yeah, by all means.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions? Okay.
All right, so this is the getting into the meat and the potatoes now. So, a lot of these numbers you have to follow, it's difficult because we've combined particular items to show where the efficiencies come in. Like there used to be in the outside of this detail, there was line items like maintenance on haul roads, which got eliminated by doing the calcium roads. You can see A1 gravel roads, that would be a combination of grading, graveling, spot road repair. It also includes the maintenance on the haul roads. It includes the debenture transfer, or the reserve transfer for the 6-year maintenance program. All of that stuff gets lumped in there. That's where the biggest amount of those efficiencies show up. You can see in 2017 we were at $6 million, $6,100,000. Now we're at $5,134,000. But there is an increase, other increases down the line that are attributed to cost of living increase, wages, those type of increases.
And Rick, just for clarification, R5 would be changed because of our discussion this morning to 750, correct?
Yeah, and then there would be a reduction of another 750 on A8.
Well,
No,
no,
no.
A8 will stay there.
Oh,
The revenue will come in on ER5.
It'll come in as revenue, R5.
Yeah, that
That,
was my question, because it doesn't balance the way it was.
that 752 isn't just the market access. There's
Yeah.
another debenture in there.
How much is that?
Well, I think the market access network one is around 740, so that's where the difference is.
12,
Yeah.
is that for Duncan?
Yeah,
What's that for?
well, Stewart siding.
Sewer siding, yeah, it was initially a Duncan Park project and it got transferred to a sewer siding project a few years ago.
So that's the difference there. But this will be reduced further once we increase that debenture payment to the full 740.
yeah, so you're gonna see a decrease in the department of about 350,000.
No, that number 752 should go up more, shouldn't it? Well, don't you have the expense of paying it out?
Paying it out?
Well, you've got an in coming in under revenues, right? Don't you have to pay it out?
A8 is the payout.
Yeah,
Well, you just told me, we just heard that that's more than the debenture for the roads.
Well, about 12,000 of that is for another debenture. The difference is for the market access network payment.
So the revenue in on R5 will increase to 740,000
Yes.
and the payment out is 740 for a debenture. So that'll cancel out and then there's another debenture in there that costs $12,000 a year.
But I think what Lauren's saying is this amount, 752,810 will stay in.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
you
sorry.
increase the
Yeah.
revenue.
Yeah, just the way it was explained, it sounded like it was going up.
But if you
Oh.
increase that revenue, then that increases the decrease of the tax support by 350,000. Or 340, whatever. So in that gravelled road, there's also a reduction of 3 seasonal positions in 2019, which is, there'll be a combination of combining some crews together, the dust control and the recon crew. So we get dust control done first before we start recon. Other advantages, things like reducing the amount of gravel that's getting put on the roads because we're not putting gravel on those 138 miles now. is operator time and truck time. It's being decreased as well.
So to bring up the roads that were kind of neglected for a while, what's gonna be the difference between what you reduced to and what you should be putting on to bring those back up to par?
So we reduced by, about 30%. So we had estimated that about 40% of our gravel, or 37 and change percent of our gravel that was being used, was going on those haul routes. So we didn't reduce the gravel by the total amount that would have been put on those haul routes. That extra gravel will buffer the difference on the roads that we felt were being neglected. Same with the grading, is that we reduced by a full grader beat, but the amount that we estimated of effort that was going into those haul routes was greater than 30%, or greater than that percentage of reducing the grader beat, if that makes sense. Typical grader, typical 1,200 miles at 9 beats was 128 miles per grader, and we built 138 roads, so there, if that's an easier math to do.
I just thought it
Transfers to reserve went up, and that's to cover off that, the increase in the 6-year maintenance program. That's A9. The safety program we reduced based on actual numbers from in 2017 to 2018, and that's staying the same going forward. That covers off safety meetings and safety training, toolbox meeting time and all of that kind of stuff, because it was being coded to the actual, if it was a grader operator, he was charging it to grade to go to a safety meeting, which wasn't quite right. Oh, well, and core, yeah.
I'm just calculating out how much the difference in the gravel was. So it's about 8%. So if you reduced it by what you said, and what you put the extra miles in, about 8%.
In gravel roads.
Yeah.
Right.
As a whole.
As a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a bunch of different lines, that gets broken down into dust control and all sorts of other graveling, grading. Some of the line items stayed about the same, and some of them were big reductions of about 30%, so your total, you're going by 5,134,000 compared to 5,413,000.
Well, no, actually, I just used numbers on the other side of the page on 218. And your reduction in miles.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, based on miles.
Carrie didn't say that. So, give me that.
Just looking at that performance measure piece on 2018 there was quite a few things there that didn't get completed. Was that just because we overestimated what we thought we could do? So just, I'm looking at 2018 goal and then accomplishment, so specifically culverts, you know, there was supposed to be 3,000 markers put in and only 500 were, and then ends cleaned, repaired 1,000 and there was 200. Was that because you had more culvert new installations that you did instead?
It's because of the flooding. So at the beginning of the year, we didn't get, and not only that, at the end of the year, we pushed the calcium program right to the very end, and we're still grading, where typically this time of year, not typically, I mean, no year is typical anymore, but a lot of times now we would have, say, a couple of grader operators that aren't grading because the roads are frozen, and they'd go around starting to install culvert markers and repairs. So that hasn't happened yet. There's still another month to go, and some of that work will get done because we do have to infill time for the grader operators that aren't grading. But if we get a big dump of snow, then all bets are off, and now they're not grading, now they're clearing snow, so.
Yeah, and it looks like you've adjusted them a bit for like the that's road reconditioning 40 miles, but I just wanted to make sure that for 2019 we were putting in realistic amounts, right, that we could accomplish.
Questions?
Yeah, that patching in cold mix roads is, that definitely needs some work, because that would be in-house stuff, where we did contract out a bunch of work, so it's not really.
It's not current either.
Yeah.
Terry gave that to me probably, when did I send the binders out a week ago, Friday. So it's probably 2-3 weeks old, those numbers do, if not more. When I do the distinguished budget, or closer to the end of the year, I'll have more accurate numbers from them.
Thanks, Jen.
And so overall, the numbers, we're, as a department, we're very proud of what we've accomplished over the last few years, and even with the numbers where they are with the decrease, we're still forecasting the next 20 and 21 at very modest increases for the size of the budget. And that would just be based on the COLA and inflationary increase.
So by not doing the calcium base stabilization to that projection we had for 2019, what do you think the savings will be?
Without doing them for 2019?
Yeah.
I didn't budget in there for increased maintenance efforts on 9-4. So we would have to increase some of the numbers if that's the case. And I would say we're probably gonna be doing the rest of the recon on there, and then maintenance through the year. So it could be, I don't know, $40,000 or $50,000 increase maybe.
Are you saying that we 40 to 50,000 more because we didn't do it?
Yeah.
I can't follow that one because of all the gravel you put on.
No, because it's a different program. You're talking capital versus operating. So the capital expense, if that disappears, then our operating costs will increase because there isn't that decrease in maintenance on that road yet.
Given the fact that we're looking for the city to offset.
Wait a minute. If you're not doing the project, you don't have any labor to do it. So the only difference is gonna be the extra passes by the grader.
And gravel. Yeah, and going there all the time, plus there's the, well, not plus, we're gonna do the reconditioning on that road regardless, I would think. it's on the list to finish that full stretch.
Okay. Well, that's the case, I didn't think that was gonna be a place, then we maybe should rethink the whole thing again.
Just to send a grader there for the day could be, I don't know, $1,000–1,200 if he has to spend the day out there, if he's really gotta work the road. Plus gravel.
So how long would it take you to do the road if you were putting the calcium on it?
8 miles, that's
Yeah.
a week.
So in a week's worth of work with all the other machinery you have, you're saying it would be more or cheaper than it is to maintain the road at a greater level?
No, but you have to invest, you have to do the initial investment. The initial investment is $110,000 a mile. And then the maintenance becomes $3,000 a mile in the budget. Right now, that road is probably gonna be, I'm gonna guess about $10,000–11,000 a mile for us to maintain that through the year next year without doing the stabilization.
I can't see that, but maybe we should bring back us some numbers on that.
Well, our typical, our heavy use roads, when we're budgeting, we budget 4 grader passes and we budget ½ inch of gravel every 5 years on a typical road. The heavy use roads were at least double the amount of gravel. In some cases, we were putting gravel on every year. So it might be quadruple times the gravel. And instead of 4 passes a year, those roads we were budgeting about 15 times, say the grader would have to go there on the heavy use roads. This one is considered, in my mind, a very heavy use road. So the maintenance costs are gonna be at least double or triple what a typical road is in the county.
I think we do need some more information, and I think the earlier discussion, and correct me if I'm wrong, was more having a conversation with the city to see where we're at with that before we move forward, did we not?
Well, I think it's more about, we don't understand how it's gonna stand out.
Yeah.
Plus, we don't understand, we need to know if the city, if it's going to be a well-used road, what's the city coming to the table with? It's twofold. Go ahead.
Well, I think we had that discussion this morning. I think we did decide that we were just gonna hold off for a year. So let's just stick to that one, and then if the costs are that outrageous, then we know for sure that we should put on the calcium-based road. That proves to us that would be the reason to do it.
Sorry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we able to look back, Rick, and could we have a good idea of what the maintenance on, say, this road in particular, what it would have cost to maintain last year? Are we able to come together with a good number of that?
And we can get Mike to run how many grader passes. Graveling, like I said, the GPS didn't work very well, but the guys have their diaries and we can go in there and figure out how much gravel's been put on there. How many times the graders went there. This year is gonna be a lot more than it was last year because of the construction that was going on and the gravel haul coming out of the Lafarge pit. So that all increased everything on that first 2 miles of that road anyway. And then out towards Casco should be very, very similar to what it's been in the past.
Just further then, is there, I don't fully know all the factors that came into establishing the original haul road network. Is there a reason this road didn't make the cut with the original allotment of miles?
Yeah, so there was, how do you get GPS?
Well,
right here.
Sorry.
You're muttering it now. So the original plan did have that as a haul road, at least part of it anyway. First, between Broxburn Road and 845. When we got into looking at the area and trying to determine the best route for the traffic to go through there and some of the hauling that was going on, the routes were adjusted. Do you have the haul route later on?
Yeah, it's hard to see, I can maybe make the line a little different here. Actually, I got the expert on it.
Just go up, turn it, you gotta turn it off. The haul is just.
No, it's on. You can see
No,
there.
that's the surface, it's not the haul itself. Right there.
Oh,
Turn
gotcha.
that on. Yeah, just make that, there you go.
Oh, okay, perfect, thanks.
Just make it imperial.
So the haul road's in yellow,
Yeah.
the proposed, what the proposed was, or what?
No, that's what was completed.
Oh,
That's what was actually done. So it kind of split the area. There, that's better. Where is, so it split the area instead of, and the idea was that the trucks coming across 10-2 would come down and then cut across. And then the trucks coming out on top, the little piece that came out of the Lafarge pit, their road use agreement took all of those trucks to the north and then out that way, and so that's partly why that was chosen. A big part of it was Henry's idea that this was the right way. Like as it was in Lauren's area, there was 2 roads to choose from, and we had to pick one or the other, and they both had similar merit to choosing them. So the one that got chosen was chosen, the other one was put on the future considerations list. So if it's 2 miles away, that's basically how it was decided that.
I'm sorry, the trouble is the trucks aren't coming down, going up, Weisman Road, coming down, going on my head. Most of the trucks are doing that 94-4 and go straight up and go into the, because they don't wanna turn, they want a straight way. And that's what the trouble is, we got a lot of trucks like that.
Right, so the other option to not doing additional haul roads is we did bring forward the option of creating mandatory haul routes versus voluntary. And that is an enforcement thing that if that's the way council wants to go, instead of investing dollars, we invest manpower in enforcement. And we force people to drive on the haul roads.
so how feasible is that to do though? Like, is it kind of like stop signs, we have 1 million of them and probably 90% of the people don't bother stopping for them?
And that's the problem with enforcement. So we're either building or increasing the network, or we're saying, you know what, these people are coming down and they're not taking the network, but they should be. So how do we force them on there? You have to give them some type of punitive penalty.
Yeah, I understand that, it's just, we don't have the manpower to kind of enforce it, is what I see as a bigger issue.
Well, that's a definite issue, but it is an option. We increase CPOs to 3 or 4, and we increase hours out there. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's not a good thing, it's a political thing.
I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just, how do you do it physically is all I meant, without.
Yeah, and it becomes very subjective to somebody saying that they had to go that way, or this is the only way they had to go, what's the shortest route to a haul route from my place, it could be this way, it could be that way. We do have it on, the Kip Road right now. People wanna cut across there all the time, and can't justify it in my own mind. I would rather drive the extra couple of miles than making that dangerous turn onto the highway. But people do it all the time, and we find overweight loads on there constantly. And why? It's short, and that's exactly what we're getting on the haul roads. They just wanna cut across.
Park Lake Road's no different.
That's exactly the same thing. That's why you're seeing running on there, is because you got 120% loads on there.
Always at late at night, 5 o'clock, and then finish about 6.
Well, and we have two CPOs on that, only work 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day or whatever they're working, and they offset shifts, so there's nobody on the weekends or nights or.
So maybe if you could bring us back those numbers, we could have a revisit of this.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it's 4 o'clock, I don't know.
Do you guys want to finish off, are you done on public works, just in the parking lot, the numbers for maintenance on 9-4?
Well, unless there's any other questions, I thought we were, but.
No, we've reduced staffing, we've reduced gravel, we've reduced equipment. We've done everything that we said we could possibly do. Except for fire Devon, but then.
Fire Devon?
We don't wanna do that.
I clarify that then with them? We can clarify
I
that?
thought he looked at Dave there for a minute.
Who does that running shoes on?
Crazy.
Hi, Lauren. I just wanted to clarify something about our fuel contract. So we actually purchase our fuel from Hughes Petroleum, and El Dorado delivers it for us.
What was it, Nick, Hughes?
Hughes,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. okay,
Who is that?
Hughes Petroleum,
Yeah, who are they?
Where are they from? Hugh, are they?
yeah, I don't know.
I know, I see the big trucks are all standing by Shaughnessy there too, filling the tanks and stuff.
El Dorado just delivers it.
Yeah,
out for
that's
our-
where I get my fuel from, too, Colorado.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So half an hour.
So I just need to run.
What our actual maintenance costs were.
All you gotta do is pour it.
It was a 3-month window,
They're out of Edmonton, Morris.
17
Oh, yeah.
You know,
because it increased this year.
Yeah.
They're out of Edmonton.
July.
Oh, I thought you meant